Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Germillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of people in my network. So these are great leads I'll be interviewing for these particular books that we cover. So I'm going to be covering three categories of books with my guests. And the first category can be a book that they're schooling me on. So the interview can be about a book that I haven't read that they're sharing ideas and insight with me on. The second category is that we pick a book or we cover a book that we've both read, whether in our past lives or specifically for this episode. And then the third category is if they've written a book and they've put the book out, published it, just to get a sense for what they want that value to be that they want us to take away from the books. So for this episode, my guest is Jess Mand, and Jess is a communications leader and founder of INDEMAND Communications. And Jess helps companies engage, inspire, and activate employees and organizations and teams. She works with Fortune 500 companies as well as small businesses on communication strategy, content creation, and creative communication projects, personalizing each client's message to their chosen audience in a way that is memorable and meaningful. A creative storyteller who simplifies complex business scenarios, Jessica delivers innovative and engaging communications programs with real positive impact. Jessica is also a co founder of and practitioner in Purpose Practice, where she works with individuals to help them realize their life's purpose and bring their desired future into reality. She believes that developing a deliberate path to the future amplifies everyone's ability to access the abundance available to all of that, to all of us. And I love that. And it plays into this book that we're going to cover, Jess. But I
Yeah.
met you during the pandemic, yet another guest that I haven't met in person. Uh, but it's been great. It's been one of those things where it's a silver lining, obviously, to a global tragedy. I mean, beyond pandemic, it's just crippled the globe. And we had met in the forum that was created right around that time through Fathom, Create What's Needed, where Brett and Matt had set up this community of people to come together to kind of get an idea of what was next and how we would. I don't know. It was just something that we haven't seen. So it kind of opened up our eyes to, okay, how do we do this as a community? What can we take away from it? How do we proceed forward? And before we started recording just now, I told you that that community, if I trace this podcast back,
Mhm.
that community is kind of the impetus for all this. It was in that community, that you get comfortable looking at your mug on screen or being on camera,
Yep.
talking to people through this medium, and then people being honest, people sharing what they're going through, getting to know people. I think because you don't have that in-person experience, that you kind of have to put a little more into the visual, into the two-dimensional that we see right now with the screen. So I think people put a little more into their conversations. And also a lot of that goes into it is that, we're in our homes,
Mhm.
so we're not out in public. We're not in somewhere that isn't our base, isn't in our home frequency. We're home. Uh, but in any case, Jess, thank you for
Yeah.
sitting down for this conversation.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. And just to further your point about making friendships during the pandemic, I love to somebody said from the Connects Exchange, we have gotten to know one another backwards. We know each other's like interior stories. We've seen each other cry, we've seen each other laugh, and all of these things that we've shared before we even understand who we are. Like, what do you do for business? All of the questions that you normally ask when you're networking or whatever, that was thrown out the window. It's like, who are you? And
Absolutely.
this
I
medium has allowed for really, connecting at a very deep, visceral level.
Yeah, and the medium is good. The tool is amazing, but it's those conversation starters. It's those fire starters like Brent and Matt and Fathom that wanted to get those conversations going. They're not afraid to bring people in with various views and various backgrounds and various topics to cover. So I mean, just to clarify for people, it was a different person covering a topic where they
Mhm.
speak maybe 10 to 15 minutes presenting on it, and then they kind of facilitate a conversation on the topic. Um, yeah, but it's just amazing how much was brought out. And anytime
Yeah.
there were experiences where people came on their first time and they cried. Not that we made them cry,
Nope.
but there was a lot that they spoke of, shared, divulged that they had never mentioned before or maybe they never felt like they were in a comfortable enough environment to bring those things up. I shared more with you guys than I had mentioned than most of my friends. And it wasn't proactively keeping it from my friends, but you just, when you feel like you're in that environment, it just, you have no choice. You just kind of open up. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that experience, and what, everybody that's attended those has contributed to it.
Yeah. Yeah. They were lifesavers, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Anchors in a
Absolutely.
time of stormy weather. So,
Absolutely. So Jess, why don't you get a little more into who you are today? Like, what's your background? What is your typical work week, or um, just work in general? What are you all about? What are you delivering for people these days?
okay, so really quickly, a look into my background is I sometimes like to say I'm a 20-year survivor of corporate America, and that's maybe a little bit unfair to corporate America because I had a lot of great experiences, but I basically grew up in IBM, AIG, Cigna, leading different communications programs for the companies, focusing on IT, HR, employee comms. And then my final role at Cigna was leading strategic communications. So all of the future building programs and projects for the company, I led the communications and support of all those, which was so interesting and exciting. But then it got to be a point where I really wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to own my own future. And so I left and I became an entrepreneur, and I launched In-Demand Communications in 2017. So instead of a typical 9 to 5 work week, I now follow kind of it like different peaks and valleys throughout the day, which I kind of love because I can then
Yeah.
also respect my own energy and take a break if I need to, or if I have like a crazy amount of work for clients, I can like soldier on through until 8 p.m. And I love that flexibility. I love the time and being able to really respect my energy throughout the day as well. A typical work week for me, gosh, every morning I'm up and I'm at the gym because working out is total sanity, like a sanity saver for me. Every evening I spend time reading because it's one of my favorite things in the world to do, even more than watching TV or movies. Forget about it. Give me a book and I'll be happy. What else? And then just client work throughout the day, and then great opportunities to Zoom with colleagues, friends, Zoom into events like the Connect Exchange or SIP sessions and whatever. So I still, even though I'm largely based out of my home, I'm still interacting with people and networking and living the COVID life nowadays. But I'm
Yeah.
happy I'm happy to say things are starting to open up, and we're trying out new ways of meeting, new ways of hybrid meetings and events where some people are together and then we still Zoom in. And I think that's what the future is going to look like. We have to find a way to do it that's really cohesive and works for everybody. But that's my week.
Yeah, there was somebody, I joined an association recently, and I was talking to the president, and I asked them how, now that things are kind of going back to normal, what they envision in terms of meetings. Was it going to be
Mm,
still virtual, hybrid, or just in person? Just because you realize how much, while we've been home and you've been able to do things from Zoom, like how much even a work balance with networking there's
mhm,
been. So instead of driving to a location, checking in, parking, getting a drink, talking one on one to different people, it's been more efficient where you log in, maybe there's a speaker, and then you just all chime in with different thoughts and approaches. And I just think it's been more efficient. But
mm,
there's just something to be said about that approach. I love going back to a hybrid or in person, but
yeah,
yeah, I mean, that's, you mentioned like the new normal of COVID, and that's definitely it. We're just more efficient. But I mean, if we're more efficient with something, it gives us more time to focus on things that we love even greater than our business or work, like family and friends and
right.
whatnot. So this is one of those situations where you have to really look for that silver lining in what's been put in front of you.
For sure. And I mean, gosh, one of the last in-person network events I went to was actually how I got introduced to the book. Because
Okay.
so somebody walked into the meeting. This was at Upward Hartford we were at, and guy walks in and, we're introducing ourselves and everything. And he's holding this book. And I'm like, what's that all about? Frequency, huh? He goes, yeah, it's really interesting. It kind of talks about, vibrational energy in the world and how we actually have a way to influence it and sometimes manipulate it. And I was like, oh, that sounds really right up my alley. And of course, went home and ordered the book, and sure enough, it's so fascinating. And John, I believe pretty strongly in the idea of being able to manifest things in your life, right? And
Because I remember when you brought this up, you're like, I forget the word you use. I'm not putting any words
yeah,
in your mouth, but I remember you saying, or is that too something for you? Is that
too
too
woo. Is that
too
too
woo
woo?
for you? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Too
like,
woo.
no, I'll try anything. If you want to read the book, let's do that. But before we dive into the
Yeah.
book, I'm always curious about people's education, their experience, how they got to where they are. So, what was it for you? Communications, right? Communications, storytelling, helping these corporations tell their story, get their message out there. So,
Hmm.
for you, what was it that drew you to that kind of work? Where how did you see that? Because for me, I'm only getting to the point where I've really appreciated storytelling, like in the last couple of years,
Yeah.
even more so with COVID, because I think so many people haven't told their stories
Hmm.
from the create what's needed and the connection exchange. When people are sharing that much, where they get that emotional piece of that, is that they haven't told their story fully. But back to you, what was it that drew you towards communicating ideas, telling stories?
Okay.
Too
I'll take
much?
you back to my childhood, okay? So as a kid, I'm a self-taught reader, and I started reading really, really young. I let's see, my eighth grade book report was on Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean Auel. And for those of you who are not familiar with the book, I think it's probably about 1,000 pages long. It is definitely not written for an eighth grader, uh, but
Wow.
but it was just something that I've always been passionate about. I've read every single Stephen King book. Like I read, all of them as a kid, and I was captivated by the power of the written word. And I knew, like there was never a question. I knew going into college, I was going to. I majored at Marist College. I majored in writing. I minored in psychology and art with a focus on photography. And then my master's degree is from Manhattanville College in communications. So it's just my path was clear from the get-go. And I realize I'm unusual. I'm probably unusual in being able to say that, from childhood. I knew what I wanted to be focusing on.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah,
It is.
yeah.
I mean, because and there's a stack of books over here that I'm going to get to that tie into the book we're going to cover. But one of them is late bloomers,
Mm,
and it has to do with what it sounds like late blooming in terms of more like not. You think about it usually in like looks, but more your profession, your calling in life, and how some people find it sooner rather than others. And even if you found it later, don't worry. Like where I fall into that second category, and you're lucky enough to fall into the first. I don't think there's one that's preferable over the other. I think you can find value in both, but
yeah.
at a certain point, I was envious of people that could know with such strength and power what they wanted to do. I mean, especially at such a young age.
Yeah. Well, and the beautiful thing about, the written word and being a storyteller or a communicator is you can use those skills in just about any industry, any job, anything. It's applicable everywhere, which is also the beauty of that. So, if I decide to change my mind and be a late bloomer in a different business or launch another company, I will still have a skill set that will be applicable regardless of whatever that's going to look like. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I find it fascinating. I've done a little writing, contributed to a book, but it's amazing where for most professions, you need tools.
mhm.
Whether you're a professional radio person or podcaster, or you're a doctor, or you're this or you're that. But I love the fact that a writer just needs like a pad and a piece of paper, a pen or a pencil, and they can just. I love that it's just starting from scratch,
Yeah.
and you can just create all these different worlds and impact all these different people. I found it fascinating. I find it more and more fascinating as I go through life. I've become a crazy reader. So I have such an appreciation for that. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And let me, to add on to that, so a single woman, no children, but I realize now I really do want to leave a legacy behind. So I have to find the book. I have to find the book inside me because I want something to live beyond me one day, and I'd love my nieces and nephews to be like, this is something that my aunt wrote, and
Yeah.
how
Oh
cool is
yeah.
that?
I was having a conversation with somebody recently about I think it was just a couple friends who we want to write something, and we're just kind of brainstorming. You have like those friends that you go to for different ideas.
Yeah.
Um, and I said, yeah, as much as I would want anything that I write to be popular, right, and successful, and tons of copies sold or whatever, just the fact that you can hold something up like that, that's bound like that. I think
Mhm.
it was during Jen T. Grace's author lab, because
Yeah.
I think she was asking, why do you want to write? What do you find in writing? Why do you want to write that book? What is it that drives you? And everybody had different responses. But the fact that you can hold something up and say, I provided these ideas, or I gave my interpretation of these ideas. I worked this hard. I got it bound, like little things like that. You
Yeah.
can hold that up, and the world is stuck with my ideas, permanently.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
yeah,
my grandfather was an author, and I'm looking at three of his books that are sitting on a shelf right above me. He wrote, I don't know, something like 10 books, and I love the fact that, I've got this physical thing, this physical creation that my ancestor has put together. How, ugh.
yeah.
Anyway, I love that.
And yeah, I was going to ask you, because you talked about the written word and how important it was to you and the benefit that you
Mm.
saw in it at such a young age. I was going to ask you. I didn't think you had, just because I hadn't heard of it. But if you had written a book, if you plan to write a book, I mean, do you have any idea what you would write about? Just a general idea.
I have a couple of ideas. So for those of you who aren't aware, I am a foodie and I love cooking. So I have a cookbook in me somewhere, and my in my head, my working title is "Let's Get Saucy."
Aha, I like
So
that. I
lots of
like that.
different ways to enhance different meals with sauces and stuff. So, but I'd like to write a book of fiction. I've grew up reading these incredible stories, and again, mentioning Stephen King, like he is a master of weaving a tale and starting with characters and details from way out here, and then weaving it together until it becomes this incredible like blossom of a story.
See, and that's interesting, because if somebody reads a book that is nonfiction, it's like, okay, they're being organized, they're being
Yeah.
strategic, they're being tactical in what they're sharing from their profession, their education, their experience, their clients, their path along the way. But if somebody writes nonfiction, that's where you really learn what kind of person you're dealing with.
Fiction. You mean fiction, right? Yeah.
Fiction,
Yeah.
sorry. That's when you really learn who you're dealing with. So I want to read the fictional world that's created by Jess Mand. That's when you really get an idea for how somebody thinks, because everything is theirs.
Yeah.
When it's nonfiction, we're just taking ideas that are already there, like in our
You have a
profession, and kind of,
framework.
you
Yeah.
have a framework. Fiction, it's like starting from scratch. So I want to read the book that Jess Mand puts together. That's fiction.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I have a picture in mind. I have just a single image. And I,
You could
and
just,
it,
I mean, I can imagine you could just start from one image and just roll with it and go from there.
yeah.
In any case, I won't
Anyway.
pick your mind too much about what you haven't done yet, but why don't you introduce us to the book? You already told us about how you came across the book.
Yeah.
Why don't you give us an overview of what we would find in the book? Just a general overview of kind of what it tries to relay to the reader.
Okay. Okay. So acknowledging that we are all made of energy. Everything in this world has a frequency and an energetic signature. And we have ways to tap into it. This book kind of goes into exploring the scientific understanding of what that frequency is, what frequencies are, what hertzes are. It goes into the different the different energetic modes of your body, your chakras. It goes into quantitative theory, no, string theory. It goes into like some deep scientific stuff in order to explain what energy is, what the frequency is that we have access to in our bodies and in our lives and in the world that surrounds us. And then it then takes it to the next level where it kind of explores what you can do within your body, your frequency to elevate and forgive me, manifest things to, things and outcomes, and how to tap into that energy. And quite honestly, it's basically a tome explaining how to be happier, healthier, how to trust in the energetic footprint of this world. And it gave me a sense of calm reading this, just knowing that, I have more power than I'm aware of. And to once I set my frequency at the right level, to trust that the outcome will be positive in the way it's meant to be positive. And it's really released a lot of anxiety for me, because many times, like, for example, like sometimes I'm overextended in certain things and I commit to too many events. And then I say to myself, you know what? Shh, the outcomes, the right outcome's going to happen. And like inevitably something gets canceled or something gets changed or moved. And I'm like, see, I didn't have to worry about anything. It just, the outcome came true. The outcome became what I needed. So, but the book
Yeah.
goes into a little bit about explaining all of that. So,
Yeah. What's interesting is, and I just mentioned before we started recording that you just mentioned anxiety. And for me,
mm,
I think a lot of the anxiety that I've felt in my life is just kind of a particular type of energy that I had in front of me, or inside of me. And that and a friend pointed this out the other day. They're like, you seem like you have this energy about you, not a physical energy. I'm not saying physical, but again, that vibration, your life force, your home frequency, right? That base
mhm,
of what your vibration is, your personal vibration. And somebody had pointed out, they were like, you seem like you have this certain amount of energy. And they're like, I see what you're doing online with the podcast and the coaching and the writing and the this and that, but there's just something that you don't seem to be tapping into, and that you seem like you're looking for that thing. So I have a new appreciation for, again, you triggered it with that word anxiety, where I think too many of us, many of the anxieties that we've had is just that it hasn't reconciled. Our energy hasn't reconciled to what's around us.
mhm,
And she goes into this in the book, where it's important to recognize it. So I mean, the overarching structure of the chapters is kind of, this is what it is, this is what it means,
mhm,
this is what it looks like, this is what you need to do to improve it, and this is how you'll feel in the end. And I mean, Jess, she goes into different exercises. Each chapter has like 5 or 6 or more try this kind of
mhm,
little sections, where based on the context of that chapter, she's telling you, think about, based on what I just said in these paragraphs, think about it this way, ask yourself this, do this. And then at the end of the chapter, she kind of has like a meditation where she kind of has you think in certain ways based on that chapter itself. There's just so much that goes into it. And I think energy is so important, because it can either, again, the same way she talks about a higher frequency is like the goal,
right.
and the lower frequency is kind of like, that's like negative territory. It kind of saps you, it kind of drains your energy. But I think it's a tool that anybody can use, because we kind of react to the world around us.
Mhm.
So we're just reacting to what people need without proactively thinking from here out what it is we need.
Right. So true. So true. And I love, she also offers, experiences, that other people have shared with her, and, in a storytelling way, kind of, how things have unfolded for different people. There was one that I was just reading, earlier. A woman wanted to win a contest for some work done in her outside yard. So landscaping work. It was a contest for $10,000 for this landscaping, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And the woman, like, the woman said, I'm going to bring my frequency and my energy level up. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to ask the trees and the grasses, what do they want? What do they want to look like and feel like? I'm going to like envision all of this stuff. And so she did the work, and then she didn't win the contest. Because she looked at so I guess so the story goes, she looked at the landscaper who was offering this contest and looked at the landscaper's work and said, well, this landscaper's not really in alignment with what I really kind of envision. And so, that energy kind of went, and she didn't win the contest. But what happened, which is so interesting, is she had a beloved aunt who was very much in love with gardening, who passed away, and was not expecting any kind of bequest, but wound up getting a bequest from this aunt, which was enough money to actually do what she wanted to do in her yard. And she was yet again able to manifest exactly what she wanted, even though it wasn't through the contest. And I just love that story. I think that's so cool. And it's another reason why you've got to trust. You've got to trust if you put that
Yeah.
energy out there.
It's so hard. I mean, we're so impatient. We want
Yep.
things right now.
Yep.
The way that we're programmed from childhood is kind of like you get in that moment what you deserve, right? Like you do the work, here's your grade. So
Yeah.
we're used to kind of, okay, if I want it now, if I do or don't get it now, that means it's a failure or not. So there's so much to be said about, and I'm guilty of this all the time. I'm always like, it is what it is. Everything happens for a reason. Thank God, because when I was younger, if something didn't go my way, I thought the world was over and I had done something wrong. But it always tends to turn out that later on down the road, much like your story, you kind of get what you need.
Yeah.
And in the moment, what you want doesn't match up to what you really need. So I mean, these ideas, everything in this book about energy and life and what you get and what you want and what you can manifest. It's like there's like a lot of cliches in there, but there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
And it's so much better than just sitting back and being reactive and just taking what life is. Because again, I've just seen so much frustration, even with coaching clients, where they are strictly, for instance, working to a job description and they're not bringing their own energy to it. And then they wonder why they're not happy, why they're unsuccessful, whatever that may mean to them. And there was just something that stood out. There's so many quotes too. She uses a lot of quotes from
Yep.
different authors and philosophers that if it applies to what she's talking about, she throws it in there. But this one particular point she makes is just, for me, it just lays it all out. It's up to you to choose how you want to feel.
Yeah.
So that's like, again, another cliche where if you rephrase it, it's like it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it. So it shows us how much control we have that I don't think we really realize as we're going through life.
Yeah. The way I like to think about it is, it takes equal amount of energy to focus on positive stuff as it is to focus on the negative stuff. So why focus on the negative when, if you stay the course, if you trust and you stay positive, the outcome could be so incredibly more positive. Whereas if you focus on the negative, it's, you're calling forward this bad energy. What's the point?
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. It's like how many, and we spoke this morning about that kind of thing where our anticipation of something tends to be stronger than when that thing happens, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. If it's a
Yeah.
good thing, we're building it up in our mind, like you said about vacation. So even though
Yeah.
vacation was good, when you're creating that world of vacation in your head, planning it, it's
Everything's
always like
possible.
everything. It's like when you read a book and you visualize it a certain way, then you go see a movie and it kind of,
You're like,
it,
oh,
yeah. So I mean, it's all about what you build up and what you put out there. And another great quote that she put in there, and I forgot to write down whose it was, but the quote is, "Don't ask yourself," because this is what I like about some of what she says is that at certain points you have to be selfish.
yeah,
Um, because I've said something like that in the past, and people are like, no, no, you got to help others, you got to help others, and I've said to them, I'm like, no, don't get me wrong, I will help people. I'll go out of my way. I learned that from my dad. It's in my nature. It's what I saw as a kid. But at a certain point, if your energy, this kind of energy, is being drained or brought down because somebody is maybe taking advantage of you, um, you have to walk away.
Yeah.
And I think what happens to a lot of us is we stick it out because we think it's like the noble thing to do. And I was talking to a friend of mine, that same friend, who she said, sometimes we get caught up in that nobility trap because it's the right
Mm,
things for others while we're suffering or not getting what we need. Not selfishly, but I think everybody deserves like a minimum level of respect, courtesy, or that energy back. In any case, that this quote is, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
mhm. Oh,
What do you
that's so beautiful. I love that. Yes, absolutely. Yes, and, you know, it's the adage, you have to keep your oxygen mask on, or put your oxygen mask on first before somebody else's. If you deplete your energy, then what good are you? We are energetic beings. We need to continue to hold our energy as sacred. And yeah, sometimes there are people that drain my energy, and they may need me. They may need like a conversation. They may, really appreciate time together, but I I feel it. I feel it. And I know like, okay, I'm going to give this person my attention, my time, but then at the end of the hour and a half, whatever, I got to go home and I've got to recharge myself. I don't know if
Yeah.
you know this about me, John. I'm a Reiki master, certified Reiki master.
Okay.
So I have a different kind of understanding of energy, or a expanded understanding of what energy is and how I can use my energy to help other people too. But then at the end of an interchange with somebody, I know I need to clean my aura. I need to cut the ties that I have put between myself and the other person, and just, let it go, because otherwise I take on somebody else's energy, and that is, it's unhealthy.
Okay. So as a master, and
Yes.
maybe I'm putting you on the spot. So then as a master, how do you balance, um, and maybe I'm using the wrong words for you, maybe I'm using the wrong words in general, but in that give and take, right?
Yeah.
In that resonance, she talks about relationship resonance, right?
Hmm.
How do you balance, is it just that point where you're like, okay, I can just sense that my energy is now going a different way, where that's kind of like the cutoff point? What my original question was, how do you balance the give and take? How do you balance the service to the other person, versus your own? Is there, yeah, I don't know, because everybody has different experiences. So is it
It's
just when
complicated.
is it just when you kind of sense that you're losing your energy has kind of, it's waving at a wavelength that's just no longer works for you? Is it that you get to that point?
That's a part of it. Yeah. I mean, self-awareness is where it all starts from, obviously. So if you start to feel like, "Ooh, I'm taking on something that's a little bit more than what I was expecting to," then, then you stop.
Yeah.
Basically, you've got to be careful. I mean, there have been times that I have forgotten to stop. I've forgotten to clean my energy, and I've gone home, and I was helping somebody that had a really bad headache. And I went home and I was messed up for 2 weeks. My head, I couldn't even turn my head. Like, I was like, "Whoa." Before I was like, "La di da, I'm a Reiki practitioner, whatever, la 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 la." And then I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 there is something real here. And you didn't respect it, Jess, and now you're learning a lesson right now. So don't do that again." So yeah, there's consequences sometimes. So I mean, and it's not just for Reiki practitioners. I mean, it's for all of us. You have to recognize when somebody starts to drain your energy, and yes, in that moment they may need you, and you are there for them, but then you've got to, you know put a beginning and an end to that interchange, and then go home and, like, recharge whatever way you want. I'm an introvert. Sometimes I like to think of myself as was it ambivert, so I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be extroverted or seem to be, but I'm truly actually an introvert. So I need like usually in the afternoon, I need to be away from everybody, away from like the computer, just so I can find a way to recharge, whether that's through meditation or a nap or whatever, just being away from people. And I have a feeling you're kind of like that too, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm I call myself like a recovering introvert. Like I was an introvert or I'm still an introvert. Um, but it's definitely, and people are like, oh, but you're doing this podcast. Oh, but you speak in front of people. Oh, but you're always like, out there. I'm like, yeah, because I'm doing what I love. So if you're doing what you love, if you're
Mhm.
talking about leadership like the way I like talking about leadership, it gets me pumped up. Like I've gotten up and spoken in front of people, and then at the end, it was like that scene from Old School where Will Ferrell does like the debating, and then at the end, he's kind of like, "What happened? I blacked out," because he just goes into that.
Yeah,
It feels like that because
yeah,
after coaching a client or after speaking, like I'm just in that flow. Uh, and I do have a little energy at the start, but my body is not used to that because as a kid, I've written that I suffered from like the quiet of quiet, or no, the triad of quiet. So I called it the quiet. And
yeah.
it's like lack of confidence,
Mhm,
introversion, and shyness. And those
mhm.
are three very different things. So for decades, my body was like that. So now that I have this energy to go out there and do all these things, my body's not used to that. So there is like that crippling feeling a little bit before speaking or hopping on here. Um, and I've gotten a little better at it, but yeah, an introvert to the point where when I first started doing these podcasts, like at the end, I was just like, it wasn't anything about the content, but just this being on all the time.
Yeah.
So that at the end, when everything was shut off, I was just like,
I
but
know, totally.
but
I'm
I'm right there with you with the
yeah,
ambivert.
yeah. That's probably one of the most remarkable benefits that I've experienced through this shutdown through COVID was, so back when everything first started happening, a year and a half ago. Are we almost 2 years? Oh, year and a half ago.
It's crazy.
When Create What's Needed first started, I was one of the early guest speakers. I think it was week 2, and I was speaking on, communicating in a crisis. I was petrified. I could hardly like I was my blood pressure was like up to here. My breathing was out of whack. Oh my god, and then I did and then, through the experience of the year, just spending time on camera and having conversations, and I had no anxiety today before starting this with you, and which is a completely different experience for me, and it's wonderful. But yeah.
Yeah, when I first started speaking and getting up in front of people, now I'm energized by it. I can't wait to get out there and speak. But my body is still, because I spent most of my life in that kind of quiet that I called it. My
I
body's
love that.
still not used to. My body's still in fight or flight.
Mhm.
But my mind is like, no, like I love doing this. I love talking to people about this. I love sharing ideas. I love starting conversations. But my mind is, or my body's still holding back. So for a split second, it's like my mind talking to my body, like, listen, get over this shit. We enjoy this. We're all in this together. let's
Yeah,
let's get it done. But
yeah,
I'm completely with you
yeah,
on that. I've gone through that journey, and I'm glad that we're both going through it, because what that quote said, that even though we were alive inside with these ideas and what we wanted to share with people, if we weren't able to communicate that, then those ideas, I think those are all ideas, not me necessarily, but you and like everybody that's in that kind of mindset. That's why I kind of like doing this, because it opens people up a little more. But just
yeah,
in general, if somebody's holding back on their ideas because they have that shyness or lack of confidence or introversion, whatever, if they choose to, if they really want to, there's just so much that we can learn from people. So, really, like, it's like do it for yourself. I think
yeah.
maybe shyness comes from, what will they think of me? What will they say about me? But it's like you have this energy inside you that you need to get out. Like it's for your own good. It's healthy to get that energy out there because if you keep it inside, I mean, I think it just leads to so many afflictions,
Hmm.
like anxiety, maybe depression, whatever it may be. I think it's because we're not getting that energy that we need to get out of us out into the world and sharing those ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Agreed.
the world needs you. Whoever you are, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, the world needs you. It needs uniqueness, not the same old thing that's going on. Everybody, even if we're talking about one particular topic, everybody has a unique voice that they can bring to that. And that uniqueness is what I mean, that's why we have how many books on leadership? How many books
Yeah.
on management? Because everybody, aside from research and studies and everything, everybody has their own wording, their own insight that they can provide, their own voice that people can hear. And it's just, it's like I said, that power of creativity of writing. Like so many people are just unaware of what they can provide, that energy that they can get out of themselves.
Yeah. So true. So true. I mean, as you were saying, everybody has something to share. It could be a smile. It could be as small as a smile to a stranger, and you've just changed that stranger's,
Absolutely.
trajectory for the day. Your energy that you bring forward, you don't know how people are responding to it, but it's probably you're doing miracles, with your eyes closed. You don't even know, and that's so
I
beautiful.
I completely agree with that. I think people, I've said it in Create What's Needed and Connects Exchange,
Hmm.
that people underestimate how much impact they can have on other people.
Yeah.
Even a thank you, a hello, like you said, a smile. I was talking to David O'Brien on this podcast a few weeks ago, and we talked about our dads and the impact that our dads had on us. And I think David had gone to his father for some kind of advice, and somehow the idea of giving 110% came up, and his dad's like, I'm paraphrasing. His dad's like, that's bullshit. No matter what it feels like, each of us only has 100%. At 100%, we're going to collapse. There's only so much capacity you have. What you need to worry about is delivering even just, and he calls it the 5% rule, even just 5% more than people anticipate or expect. So
Yeah.
we can be such artists, we can be such creatives with just how we interact with people, giving them a certain experience. So I mean, that's just for me, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's just so important. And I think again, a lot of us react instead of really sharing who we are and sharing that energy.
Hmm.
I could talk
True.
about this for days, Jess. But anyway, did you have something else to say?
The only thing I was going to say is that, the reason why I really love this book is that it does put an explanation to the woo. That's all.
The
I mean,
woo.
I love this stuff, but I love the fact that this book really gives strength and energy to understanding why.
The
Why?
only the only area she lost me on that got way
Yeah.
too woo for me, and I have like liner notes where I just like I have like definitions or um, it was when she was telling you to like what's the word, Jess, where she's like tap into like this plant. What is this plant telling you, or tap
Oh, yeah.
into that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
I can't relate to it in that way, but obviously I can relate to how I design my house, what I buy for the house, like what kind of energy something gives me. So the way she was wording it, I was making fun of her at first, but then I'm like, wait, the way that even just the way that I dress, like the energy, the vibration that I get from, I don't know, looking a certain way, decorating my house a certain way, whatever it may be, whatever I buy, that was the only area that was too woo for me. So that's not bad. That's not bad. That's not
That's
bad.
no, that's I'm impressed actually.
I didn't really think she was too woo. I thought it
Yeah.
was pretty good because, like you said, she covers a lot of science. She covers like the ray. Was it the frequencies, the
The
the spectrum
frequencies.
of frequencies? She
Yep.
covers like your brain. She has a lot of great lists. Hold on, I just made a quick list of the lists that I found interesting. So some of them, one is the benefits of being consciously sensitive. So really opening up to what you're sensing from other people or your
Mhm.
environment. basic misconceptions about life. There's a vibrational sensitivity survey in there that you can take to see how sensitive you are to those vibrations of your environment. 7 ways you get stuck in low personal vibrations.
Hmm.
And the thing is, people can be listening or watching, but you're like, no, I don't have any examples. But if you see a list of them, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's one of those areas. A list of your negative preoccupations and worries. Shit, I could have checked off everything on that list. Tips for becoming more consciously sensitive, relationships, like reasons for troublesome relationships, quality of home. I mean, there's just so many lists, there's so many exercises. So it's not just read what I'm writing, but she actually gives you ideas of how to
Yeah.
approach it for yourself. So I thought
Yeah.
that was great.
And so she is so the author is Penny Pierce. Since we haven't mentioned her name yet, but yeah. Yeah, I am so delighted that you actually got all of that from this experience, from this book. I'm absolutely delighted. So
And let me tell you, we read it a while ago,
we did.
right? And I
Yep.
read it. I read it at that point. I took notes at that point. Uh, I had an understanding of that point. I did appreciate it. Again, at that point, the only woo moment was when she was like, what is your plant saying to you, or
Yeah.
what, however she put it. But when we decided to actually sit down for this conversation, I went back and looked through it, and my take on it is
Mm,
completely different than when I read it just 3 months ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. My take is different just because I kind of ingested what you said, and I've not even consciously, but you go through life, you're like, man, this is draining. Like, where do I gravitate that's gonna like raise up my frequency? So when I sat down for you, or as I'm sitting down with you right now, my take on it is just completely different. So that what you're taking away from what I'd taken away, that is just from having read it and then really seeing it
experiencing it.
play out in life.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing.
Fabulous.
So let's see, how can you give me examples of how you apply this to your life, leadership, and work? You had mentioned a few where you kind of felt like shit after being in certain situations.
Yeah.
What about work wise? What about profession wise? What about with your clients? No names, will protect the innocent, but have there been examples professionally, leadership, or
Yeah.
work where this kind of resonates, where it's your energy, but in those environments? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So so every entrepreneur has ups and downs, and working through COVID has been at times fantastic and at times kind of difficult because a lot of what I do is usually networking and meeting new clients and making new contacts and connections. And in the last year and a half, that's really been very, very difficult, of course.
Yeah.
So things got a little bit slow, and I realized I was always the one helping others like make that connection, make manifest new energy in their business and in their lives. And I kind of had one of these look in the mirror moments like, hey, dude, it's time for you to do that for yourself. So I sat down and I thought through kind of what kind of energy do I want to manifest in my business. And I wrote a letter and I wrote a one-page description about all of the things that I'm good at. And I energetically put that out there. And I reached out to a small portion of my network. And within 2 weeks, I was overwhelmed with new opportunities, new leads, new business, all sorts of different things. So that's maybe a little bit more of a real way of using this the lessons of this book, but it was one way that really worked for me.
Yeah. And that's, I have this stack that I'll reference in a little bit of
Yeah.
books that kind of tie into this one. But something you just said about, and it goes back, you've always shared about manifesting, what it means. But I just read, I don't want to say the wrong book. There's two like major books on habit, and I don't have it here. I think it is The Power of Habit.
Yep. Okay.
I forget if it's that one or another one. I should clarify, but it's downstairs. In any case, uh, as the author's talking about habits, he says, and if you want to lose weight or if you want to stop smoking, um, if somebody offers you a cigarette, don't say, "Oh no, I'm trying to quit smoking." Say, "No, I don't smoke." Or whatever it is that goal wants you want to be,
Yeah.
say that you're that. Put yourself in that mindset. Uh, in talking to a friend this week, same kind of idea. She's like, if I want to build my business to a certain level, I got to put myself in that mentality and start talking it with that mentality.
Hmm.
So there's just so much that we can control, um,
I love that.
even before like clients come our way, even before everything starts outside, just starting with the way that I think, I
Right.
mean, you yourself just writing that letter, I think there's just something about putting an idea out there of what you want and it's specifically writing it down to see it.
Hmm. Absolutely. I have a journal. I'm not a big journal person, but I try to respect, I try to follow a pattern of writing in this journal 2 times in a month, one on the new moon and one with the full moon, just because there are patterns you're supposed to follow. Sorry, this gets woo.
No,
I
no, no.
apologize.
And I've seen on Instagram, I always see like
My,
your
yeah.
posts about where the moon is and what that means. And no, I appreciate I believe in like the horoscope stuff. So
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. What's your sign?
Libra.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Um, all right. So, like during the new moon phase, you're supposed to dream about what you want to achieve in the next month, 2 months. So you write down that vision, right? So very simply, and then during the full moon, which tonight is the full moon, it's the
Oh yeah,
Aries
that's right.
full moon, blood moon, harvest moon. So during the full moon, you're supposed to write down the things that you want to let go of, because you got to let go of the stuff in order to make room for the things you do want. And it's a good discipline. It's healthy, and I mean, yes, it's tied to the moon cycles, blah blah blah, but it's a nice way to just practice, thinking about what you want, and letting go of the things you don't want. Everybody should be doing this. It doesn't have to be a woo thing. Everybody should be doing this.
Uh yeah, I agree. I don't think we do that enough.
Mm.
We hear about it now. Aside from the example you've given, but there is a lot to be said about just writing down, seeing it in writing,
Yes.
seeing it visually, what you don't want, there is just thinking it, not even consciously in your head. Oh, I should do better with this, or I should, stay away from that. Thinking it in the moment is different than consciously putting it together, writing it down, and almost having a plan in front of you.
Yeah.
So,
Writing it down
um,
makes it sticky.
it's crazy how much it does. It's crazy. It's just you can have all the best intentions in the world, again, in your head, the purest heart, the sharpest mind to get to where you want to go, but writing it down is just something that does it.
Mhm.
It's almost like the paper collects it so that you don't have to organize it anymore. Now you can focus on like the execution and the ideas behind
You've
it.
taken it from here, you've put it down. Now it's going to do its work. And now
Yeah.
you don't have to think about it anymore. You've already put it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some other books? Now I'll kind of jump into my stack over here, but what are some other books that you've read that are maybe similar in the same kind of vein as this book? So if somebody watches this, listens to this, reads the book, likes it, are there other books that would complement that kind of vision that this book has?
Yeah, so one book that comes to mind, which I know you're covering, with Antonia. I'm very excited because I had recommended the book to Antonia. It's called Big Magic, and it's by Elizabeth Gilbert, the same woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. But it's definitely, it's an interesting book in a similar vein about how to bring forward magic in your life, and it's a lot about putting things down and writing things down, and visualizing a story that needs to be told, and how that's going to come out. And she's a delightful writer. And I love the examples she uses. One in particular that stood out to me, she wrote about A woman, no, wait, she wrote about herself. She had an idea for a very unique storyline, and she started writing it. I think she may have written the first chapter or two, but it was very specific. It had to do with, I can't remember the plot, but the plot was very specific. And then she kind of forgot about it, and she kind of like put it off, put it off, put it off. And then she went to some sort of a convention and met someone else who had shared that she was writing a book about the same exact plot line. And it was like, when I say that the plot line was specific, it was very specific. And so she was completely astonished that this other person, completely separate to her, that she had never spoken to before, had the same concept and was writing a storyline in the same vein. And the point was, the idea of the story got bored waiting around for it to become a reality and went someplace else to find a different author to make it a reality.
On to the next person.
And I think that's the coolest thing. You have to respect inspiration. You have to foster it, feed it, love it, in order for it to become that book or whatever that is in your life that you want to see come forward. And if you give it a little energy and then forget about it, it's going away. It's going to find somebody else. So it's a lesson. It's an interesting lesson.
Yeah. And I pause just because I'm really open to that now. Uh, and again, it's only in the last year and a half since the pandemic where, with quarantine, with, standing back from people, being more with your family, with yourself, it kind of gives you more. And granted, I'm an introvert, but it gives you even more time to focus on yourself and what you want. So you
Yeah.
try to visit with family, you try to visit with friends as much as you want, but it gives you a little more alone time. So, and in reading all the books for this series, what I've read before, I'm at that point now. So what's exciting is like when you get to that point where you look at things this way, it's like the sky really is the limit. Like you can create for yourself whatever it is you want, or at least work in that direction and get started. I think a lot of us wait for maybe signs from the universe or help from the universe in terms of somebody bringing it to our attention, or forcing us to do it instead of starting from inside out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like to say, I've been very fortunate in my career path. I have been so fortunate. Things have unfolded in a way that's just been really natural, and I had a great trajectory in corporate America, and things are great. What if, what if I was more deliberate from the get-go, from the very beginning, and I had that future vision of where I wanted to go? Instead of taking a 20-year trajectory path in corporate America, what if I could have cut it down like by 5 years? I could have achieved all of that in 20 years and 5 years by being deliberate in where I wanted to go. You know,
I've thought about that. I mean, when it came to that book, Late Bloomers, I thought about, okay, well, right now I feel like I'm working in my path. I'm working towards my purpose. I think this is what I was meant for, is coaching, helping people, motivating people. And it took me till I was like 35 to figure that out. So what if I had, and because of that, I have better life experiences at 35 than I did at what, 20, 21, if I'd gotten out of college knowing that that's what I wanted to do. Would I have been the same coach that I am now without those life experiences? I don't, although there was a frustration in not being able to know, like some people, what I wanted to do when I was 8 years old. I don't think there's anything that I would change, because everything that has happened as late in my blooming as I've been has led to now. And
yeah,
now I'm enjoying the ride. Now I'm like being very proactive about enjoying the ride, creating those daily moments. Again, you and I talked before we started recording where I don't look at, somebody had asked, what are your goals? And I'm like, yeah, I want to be a writer. Yeah, I want to be a speaker. Yeah, like a higher level, whatever it may be. But I've just gotten more joy out of intentionally enjoying every day and making every day count and just recognizing that energy that I have. So I don't know. It's such a tricky question to think about. What would I change about my past? Would I have gotten to this point sooner? But would I be the same person? Would I love it as much? Would I've gotten sick of it? And maybe I would have gotten sick of it and moved on to something that I was more passionate about. Everything happens for a reason, Jess.
It does.
You
It's
know?
true. It's true. But you have a choice now too to like move forward with more deliberation, as I do. And so I've been committing to sitting down and writing on paper what that next chapter should look like, what I want it to look like, what that big dream is.
Yeah.
Because I believe in that frequency that I can bring forward, and gosh, how exciting to think that I have a chance to unfold something really spectacular in my
It's
future.
exciting too because one thing that's come up a lot in the last couple of weeks in this kind of discussion has been Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Hmm.
Um, and I was talking to somebody, I forget who, because it really has come up like 3 or 4 times. It's so weird. But what's great about this point in life is that, you have Maslow's hierarchy where it's like the most important thing you need is like safety, security, and then it builds up into like your self, your belonging, your
Yep.
psychological belonging, your esteem, and then like self fulfillment is at the top. Um, but what's great is like we're at the point, or I'm at the point at least, where everything that I need, all the foundational stuff is there, which is great because now I can spend it from this point forward building towards that self fulfillment.
Yeah.
So, like, all my family's needs are taken care of. We don't need to stress about anything, because my parents were blue collar workers, my dad working 2 jobs sometimes. So I know what that kind of stress is like. So although I may have stress now about my family's needs, I can put it in perspective. So I feel like the needs, the shelter, the food, the basic needs that we need are like taken care of. Belonging, I got the friends, the family. But now that I can work on um, that top part, the fulfillment, like really working to design and create what it is that I want.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the final lesson I'd like to leave people with is also, it's so important to show gratitude, to feel gratitude for what we have, for those needs have been met. Wake up in the morning and be grateful for the health that you've been given, for the warmth of the covers covering you in bed, you know, the thankful and excited about what that day is going to become for you, all the possibilities, just we have to remind ourselves to be grateful and express gratitude for it all.
Yeah, I've always read about like a gratitude journal, and
Mhm.
way back when I'm like, what is that really going to do? But
Yeah.
again, you put it down, you write it down, and even if you do have a natural daily gratitude towards those things you list, once you list them, it enhances everything. So
Yeah.
it's just so much power again in just writing things down. But let
Yeah.
me let me run through these books very
Yeah.
quickly. It's not going to be a dissertation on each one. Just kind of as I was reading this book, I'd read a sentence or a paragraph and be like, "Oh, it reminds me of whatever book," and then I'd make a note. So it reminds me of the Four Agreements
Yep. Okay.
because there's a lot of reprogramming that
Mhm.
we were programmed one way coming up and we have to change that. So it's about that intentional reprogramming. This may be different from frequencies reprogramming, but it's reprogramming nonetheless.
Yep.
Let's see. The upside is stress. So she says in the book that you need to be in your emotions, not run away from them, but really take them on. And this talks about stress. This book is a great book, by the way, which tells you that the stress is there for a reason and that you should use it to your benefit. There's a reason it's there. And it goes into the brain, the frontal cortex, the reptilian brain. It goes into all that, which is similar to frequency because she talks about that in frequency, about the different sections of your brain and how we use them.
That's right.
Mindset by Carol Dweck,
Okay.
because frequency talks about either staying where you are and taking things as they are or being proactive and going for whatever. Where this is like a seminal book in development, in psychology development, where it's about the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And I
Hmm.
recommend all these books, by the way.
Hmm.
Late bloomer. This is the one I was just talking about.
Yeah, I'm writing that one
Um,
down.
Late bloomers: the power of patience in a world obsessed with early achievement. Um, Great book for those of us that felt like we bloomed late in life in terms of what we wanted to do. We still are trying to create our path versus people that knew from the get-go exactly what they wanted to do. You don't really read about that too often, so it was a great book to read. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That's a great one.
Yep.
A counterintuitive approach to living a good life. This one stands out when she talks about, listen, you can only help others to a certain point,
Hmm.
so you have to take care of yourself at a certain point. So this breaks into that. I mean, and it doesn't mean not giving a fuck about anything. It means
Right.
picking and choosing, being proactive and selective about what you care about. Quiet: the power
Mm.
of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. Again, just for obvious reasons, you and I had talked about introversion, how it factors into frequency and energy. And I think this is a great book. If you haven't read it, Jess, I highly recommend it.
Okay, definitely. I'm circling that one.
Da, 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 da. The obstacle is the way. This has to do with Stoic philosophy. And
Hmm.
this one I bring up just because, and this is the obstacle is the way, the timeless art of turning trials into triumph. This one I bring up because it's almost opposite of what she's saying. There's similarities, but she says you should be in your emotions. Where this is like, keep emotion out of it. What's in front of you? Think about it in a practical way. You can only control so much. So a great read. It's great having those two mindsets where it's kind of like you have to be in your emotions, and this one where it's like, no, keep them out of it. That way you can kind of pick and choose what works for you and
Hmm.
what may work going forward. Breathe: the new science of a lost art.
Did
Was
you
that
read
it?
that recent?
Was that an example?
That
Like
was
your exhale?
I. I don't know what it is. Sometimes, anytime somebody says breathe, I just I have to. I should probably read that. I know I am not actually a very good breather, believe it or
Yeah,
not.
I think you were going to ask if I read this recently.
I remember
I
you
I
talk
put this
about
up
it,
on
right?
Instagram. I put this
Yeah.
up on social media. Um, so I only started doing that like in the last year, I think. So
Yeah.
some of these are up on my social media, others aren't. But I highly recommend that. We take it for granted.
Hmm.
And as I've talked about my anxiety, I realize how much I don't breathe, like how much I'm like always holding my breath,
Yeah.
and how much if I, there are exercises in that as well, and how much if I am just take a pause and just really focus on my breathing, it alleviates that anxiety. It just a little. It's not going to take it all away, and I should be more intentional and more consistent with it, which I plan to be. But and then the last one is flow.
I've heard of that.
Flow: the psychology of optimal experience. And this is, I bring that up just because she talks about how when you are in your right energy, right? If you're
Hmm.
like right here and you go up higher where you're supposed to be, or you're lower and it's down here, that when you are in those environments, when you're with those people that are at your level or where you need to be, everything just kind of, whether you're doing certain work that brings it out of you, um, it's just like a state of flow. It's like these conversations. At the end, it really will feel like I blacked out. Be like, what happened? Just because we're exchanging great ideas. So
Yeah.
those are some great books. I highly recommend them all, and I just want to
Yeah.
bring them up because
This is
part,
next for me.
what is that?
Which
Ah,
Alchemist.
yeah, just read that a couple months ago.
Yep. See, I'm paying attention to your books
I
and what you're
know. I
reading and
appreciate
everything.
that. All it takes is one person to appreciate it, and my job is done. That's the
Yeah.
best part of doing this, is just kind of making an impact on even
Hmm.
just one person. So I appreciate that, Jess. So generally, how would you craft a message to others, no matter what field they're in, no matter if they believe in the woo or not? What would you say in one package, what the lesson of the book is? How would you convey it to somebody?
Um, you have the ability to shift your energy in whatever way that looks like for you, for your better good and for the better good of people and the environments around you. Why not actually understand the scientific theory behind it and how to do it. This book will give you the guidance that you need going forward to understand both sides, the scientific and the woo.
And the woo. And
And
listen,
the woo.
Jess said it to me because she knows I'm not that woo. I'm not into, or not that I'm not into, I just don't post about it. So she said, listen, here's this book. I don't know if it's too woo for you. I'm like, all right, I know what you mean, but I'll give it a whirl. And it's not that woo. Like the percentage is very because I think people may not relate to that, but it's there's a lot of science behind it, interpretation, so you can probably see yourself in the story she tells, in the examples she gives, in the list of exercises and meditations. You may find something in there that you can't think about now listening to this, but when she gives an example of what things look like, you'll be like, oh shit, yeah, that is me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my lesson, is just a, you control more of your environment than you think you do. Do
Mm-hmm.
not tolerate, do not tolerate an environment where you have to forego who you are, because I've seen it way too much in my life, with friends, with myself. I've seen it too much with coaching clients, where when they get to a point where they're happy or fulfilled, it's like that they finally brought themselves into that role. They finally brought who they were into the role. So there's just too much that people give up.
Yeah.
They play the cards that they're dealt. So this shows you, listen, if you're in an environment where it's not conducive to your growth, to that energy flowing, seek out what's right with you, so what's right for you. So I highly recommend it for that purpose. So, Jess, why don't you? Is there anything you want to share about what you're up to these days? I mean, you'd given examples of your work that you do, but is there anything coming up that you want to share with people that they could check out, or any of your work or website, whatever you want to share?
I'd love to, but my neighbor just started mowing the lawn outside my window.
That's all right. We're wrapping up anyway.
Okay, he's going away. Okay, what I'd love to share is for the Connect Exchange, the final Connect Exchange of the year. I'm going to revisit the topic of manifesting,
Okay.
and I'm actually going to use a lot of some of the exercises in this book to share with attendees to help bring people through a process. So and it's at the end of the year, it's the perfect time to set intentions for 2022. Can you believe that it's almost here? So that's
What
what I.
what's the date on that?
Oh gosh, it's the
Is it? I mean,
last
is it? Or just
Thursday.
give the website, or if you know the month.
Yeah, so it would be December. It would
Okay.
be, let's see, I'm looking at December 26th. No,
Oh,
wait,
okay. So
wait.
I didn't know if you guys maybe stopped in November just for like the holidays, but you guys are going to like the last week. That's good.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, December 30th, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
Jesus.
we are straight through the end of the year. We
Okay.
certainly are. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right. Website, do you want to share anything, or your social media, whatever you want to
sure.
provide?
So my website is www.indemandcoms.com. So INDEMANDCOMMS.com. I'm also, you can find more information about Purpose Practiced at www.purposepracticed.com. And that's about it. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the social stuff. You can find me in Instagram and as Auntie A Plus, because I'm
Oh,
the
that's
aunt
right.
to
Yeah.
4 kids.
Yeah.
So Auntie A Plus.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll share whatever information I can when I post this, all right?
All right. Thank you.
But in the meantime, thanks for sitting down with me, Jess. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, John.
It's always fun. So thank you to everyone for watching and listening. If there's anything that I might have missed, there's so much to cover in a limited amount of time. Please reach out, let me know. And if there are any questions that I can answer, great. If there's something you want to ask of Jess, I can relay the message to her. Just let me know whatever it is that I might have missed or what you're curious about. But in the meantime, take care, and we'll see you soon.